It's been almost a decade since The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword was released for the Wii. It's the last traditionally designed Zelda game since Nintendo redesigned the series structure entirely for Breath of the Wild on the Wii U and Switch. Going back to it in 2021, I was excited and slightly worried about how I'd feel about it after all these years. Would it feel dated, or would it feel nostalgic? Combining improved visuals and quality of life improvements, this is supposed to be the definitive way to either replay or play for the first time this Nintendo classic. But before we jump into the review, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on my reviews. Only 10% of you watching are subscribed, so make sure you get subscribed. You can also join my Discord server for free with the link in the description. Taking place at the beginning of the Zelda timeline, Skyward Sword tells the legend of, Zelda, living in a flying city called Skyloft. The legend tells that underneath the clouds is all but a myth. We play as a knight in training, Link, who after passing their training exam, goes on a celebratory flight with Zelda, only to have a dark tornado take her away beneath the clouds. Equipped with the goddess sword holding the spirit of the sword named Fi, Link goes on a mission beyond the unknown to bring Zelda back. When it was originally released, I appreciated hearing this part of the series told. While most of the games start with the established kingdom, Skyward Sword backpedaled it to way before the establishment of the Kingdom of Hyrule. It's a grassroots story for the series, one that dives headfirst into its lore. Additionally, the multiple perspectives from the land and sky truly made this one of the more unique and memorable stories for the series. Being the first Legend of Zelda Wii game built from the ground up for the platform, Nintendo opted for motion control centric gameplay schemes that left many players lukewarm on its unique take for the series. While I personally wasn't overly positive or negative on it in 2011, I wasn't even reviewing games back then, and no doubt helped shape the gameplay foundation for Skyward Sword, and despite Nintendo's attempts of converting them to buttons for handheld play on the Switch, motion controls still feel like the way to play whether you like them or not. Despite the Wii Motion Plus system being upgraded from the base Wii remote, the Joy-Cons still feel like a step up from them when it comes to motion accuracy. With that said, it's still not 100% of the way there, and that means sometimes your slice will register as a stab and vice versa. When you're fighting against enemies designed to solely get swung at in a specific direction, it can get annoying. Like most Switch games that mimic the Wii remote, it also suffers from having to constantly recenter the controller. Since there isn't a sensor bar on the Switch, the console relies on the gyroscope in the Joy-Con to pinpoint the location, and that means it often can find itself on the edges of the screen. While it's not game-breaking by any means, it's another chore to have to deal with while playing with the motion controls on the improved version of this game. As mentioned before, Nintendo has added some physical button controls that you can use as a replacement when playing with the controller or in handheld mode. While it technically works, it also suffers from a lack of accuracy. The new button controls map the swing of the sword to the right analog stick. It takes a bit to get used to at first, but what was more cumbersome was trying to register those swings correctly. Luckily, having to repeatedly flick the analog stick is less intrusive than swinging your arm around repeatedly, but both can result in some awkward spamming. In the end, they're not terrible, but they definitely make me miss Breath of the Wild's combat system, a trend I found myself thinking about quite a few times while replaying this. Outside of the newly updated controls, Nintendo has added quite a few quality of life improvements that streamline the original 30-ish or so hour campaign for both new players and veteran players. Fi, who has a ton of narration in the first release, has been streamlined to be, let's say, less intrusive. Picking up items you've already picked up before no longer gives you a full description of said item over and over again. Cutscenes can also be skipped for anyone just replaying this, so you can quickly just jump into the core gameplay if you'd like. There's even a handy fast travel system, although that's been locked behind an amiibo, a practice that I'm not the biggest fan of that doesn't seem like it should be an exclusive piece of content, but just a general quality of life improvement that should have been included. Outside of the upgrades, the core mechanics of Skyward Sword are still here, and my takes on that has evolved since 2011. Taking a completely linear approach as opposed to Breath of the Wild, I really appreciated the more thought out and intricate puzzle designs found across the various main dungeons. However, I don't feel that incentive to explore as much anymore because of how linear it is. Boss battles, on the other hand, shine as some of the best in the series, with some memorable moments about a decade later. Being an HD remaster of the original 480p 30 frames per second Wii game, I was excited to see what improvements Nintendo would go about with this release. I'm happy to say the improvements here are fantastic, at least within the realm of expectations. The Nintendo Switch version runs Skyward Sword at a mostly solid 1080p 60 frames per second. The drops tend to happen more often in the more intensive cutscenes, but the gameplay remains intact. When switching to handheld mode, the performance continues to be great at 720p 60 frames per second for a smooth handheld experience. The improved resolution helps the visuals look much sharper, but at the cost of the watercolor-like visuals that were so prominent in the original release. The trade-off, of course, is some improved looking character models, sharper shadows, and some slightly improved view distances. Something newly added to its presentation is the ability to free control the camera when playing with the motion control system. While it's technically possible to do it with the button control mode too, It's more cumbersome as you have to use that same analog stick to attack. The workaround is holding down the L button at the same time, but it doesn't feel all that great in person. Skyward Sword has such a memorable soundtrack that continues to shine a spotlight on the series as a whole for nothing but exquisite pieces back to back. The Ballad of the Goddess continues to be one of the best songs in the series, easily ramping up my adrenaline ready to set forth on the new adventure. Beyond the original selection of songs, the new remixes and recompositions of songs like the File Select sound absolutely fantastic. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD does feel dated at times, but not so much because it's bad, just so vastly redesigned for the better in Breath of the Wild. I love these more intricate dungeons, the various locations and puzzles alongside them continue to feel unique and well thought out, still holding their place in the series to this day. It's easily the best part of this entry. It might mark the end of what was the original structure for the Legend of Zelda series, and despite some shortcomings, I did, and almost 10 years later, still continue to look at this in quite a positive note. Thank you very much for watching my review. If you found it informative and entertaining, then please consider subscribing. I make reviews for all the latest AAA and indie games. What's your favorite Legend of Zelda game? In regards to 3D, I'd pick Breath of the Wild, but for 2D, I'd probably pick Link to the Past. Let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, until the next video, I'll talk to you in the comments down below or over on the free Discord server in the description.